244th Contact, Sunday, 27th of December 1992, 21:48. Translators are DeepL Translator-Auto-Translation and Joseph Darmanin.
It's nice that you're still coming in the old year. It really took a long time, as you said. But still be welcome, my friend. I really missed you. But there are also some questions that are important that you give me answers. I am happy that you are here again and that you are doing well. I see.
The joy is also mine, friend Edward. For quite some time now it has also been a great need for me to see you again and to entertain myself with you. However, I don't want to do this officially, but together among friends, which is why I would like to ask you to bring up your questions, so that I can answer you, after which we want to talk in personal form. There are also some things that are not directly related to me to discuss, but I assume that you can give me some advice. There are also various things to discuss that should not be made public.
Of course, Ptaah, I will follow your wishes. So I will immediately come to my questions, the first of which is the
widest A.
The next question is it possible or given that organic life forms in the world space age faster than on Earth or on other planets due to some circumstances?
Certainly, a certain radiation in the world space, which I do not want to describe in detail and also in its actual mode of action and may not name, causes a faster aging of organic life forms in the free world space. If the life forms are not protected by any devices, protective clothing or space bodies etc., this radiation prevails in the entire world space. While these are weakened however on planets by their different spheres as far as possible and come only very minimally to the validity.
Very many people on Earth are of the mistaken opinion that any things that prevail on Earth could only be changed if many people together would change these things together. They do not understand, however, that the world and things can only be changed if each individual does something about it, which is why each individual human being must take the initiative and act in a personal way. These individual people then group together with like-minded people who can be found practically automatically, creating an actionable and useful force through which the negative can be changed for the better and real progress achieved. It is not understood, however, that the individual human being must take the initiative and act, which is why one always waits for a group to form somewhere that can be joined by those who think somewhat in the form of this group. In this group these individuals are strong and energetic, but on their own they are completely and absolutely uninitiative, fearful and unable to live. I know that this misconduct lies in the failure to recognize and reject self-responsibility, in every relationship, and in the failure to recognize and grasp the truth of all things. But I find no other way to make this clear and understandable to people than the one I have always used, that I throw the truth at people's heads with hard words, which does not, however, bring the success that should actually be expected from rational people. I always study around with the fact that there should be a word of power which immediately has the necessary positive effect if the word is only spoken. But I do not find such a word of power. Often one is almost overcome with sheer despair when one sees that all talking, roaring, asking and explaining is simply useless. How do you see these things? Is there any possibility other than the way I do everything? Everything behaved in this way in Nocademian's times, but perhaps some way in your federation have made new experiences in this relationship that go beyond what I know and point a new way in relation to the teaching of people and in relation to the awakening and application and bearing of each person's self-responsibility.
You say a true word when you say that everything was like this already in Nocademian's times. In fact, everything has been preserved since then, and nothing has changed in this respect. Nocademian already then fathomed that human thinking, senses and aspirations are interpreted in the form you have just described, and that the only way of teaching people can also only be handled and exercised in the form you have also described and applied yourself. Since Nicodemus' times, no wise men have gained other insights or made other experiences in this respect, nor any wise men in our federation. Also the level Arathatharsata has no other experienced knowledge, which you know better than me.
Thank you. It was only a question of whether something newer knowledge and experience had been acquired in this form in recent times. But this is not the case, a pity. So I come to the next question. In the group we have recently had problems with the absence of group members at the monthly meetings and at the meditations on the third weekend. There has been a murmur throughout the group, especially because of Bridget, who works as a nurse and is therefore often absent. You and we have talked about this several times, and you said that her profession was actually her destiny, and that as a result she could not be as occupied with various obligations in the group as the other members of the group were. As a consequence, I explained to Bridget that her work was always ahead of her, since it was given according to regulations. In this episode, she has been absent several times this year from the monthly meetings, the meditations, the night vigils and the Sunday services. Have I perhaps misunderstood you, or is something else wrong because the grumbling in the group becomes loud? That shouldn't be the case if everything behaves correctly.
That's an issue I wanted to discuss with you anyway. I actually wanted to talk to you about it during my last visit, but I didn't do it because we had so many other things to talk about.
Man, I'm glad you can forget something that's important too. So I'm not alone with this problem that I've had sometimes since I collapsed in 1982.
Such unfortunate occurrences can occur here and there, but now to your question. You really must have misunderstood me, because the release of Bridget in connection with her profession only refers to self-willed and thus to voluntary duties towards the group and the mission. This means that she must fully fulfill her duties when it comes to those that are missionary, such as monthly meetings, meditations in the form of the third weekend, initiation, center meditation, night watch, Sunday service and group work in the areas of Engelbert, Maria, Cornelia, Silvano, Madeline and Brunhilde. She cannot be exempted from these obligations, except by the fixed possibilities given by your rules.
You mean the rules as described in the manual, etc.?
This is what my words are about.
She can only be exempted from the above-mentioned obligations if this results from the application of the above-mentioned rules and if these rules are fulfilled directly on behalf of her employers.
So what does it mean that she can be exempted from obligations?
Only those matters that relate to self-regulation and to self-reliant and voluntary duties, such as the several weekly proofreadings, etc. that you make.
But then the exemption is very limited.
But that's already a lot.
But what is it like if she has to work according to her employment contract during the compulsory performance periods, for example on the first and third weekend?
She has to arrange things as much as possible so that she can fulfill her mission duty at these times. Only absolute exceptions can be made if the employers demand such an exception.
And I got Bridget into something through a misunderstanding that doesn't exactly help bring her mood to a climax. Through my fault, she also acted against her obligations and presumably committed quite a bit of evil. I don't think that's right, because I'm the one who's actually to blame. How can I repair this damage for Bridget?
Such a repair of damage, as you call it, is not necessary, because Bridget acted according to your instructions and remarks, even if they were full of misunderstandings. So she has acted in good faith that your instructions and statements are correct, which puts her in a condition without error.
That means she didn't accumulate any injustice?
Certainly, that is correct. It is within the range of good values, as is the case with all, except for 2 group members, whose respective unworth is still much higher than the average of all others.
May one know who the two are?
It is not necessary to give names, because the two concerned know it themselves, or at least they can find out for themselves if they think about themselves and become honest with themselves.
I understand. Then the next question, to what extent are medicinal herbs poisonous, and are they all poisonous, even for teas?
With very few exceptions, all herbs and medicinal herbs are non-toxic only in certain quantities. If the correct and non-toxic amount is exceeded, then a toxic effect occurs very quickly, which can be presented depending on the herb, tea etc., from nausea, abdominal upset, headaches, vomiting, dizziness, vision problems and many other lenient things. The effect can go as far as liver damage, cancer and death.
So the principle is that too much is unhealthy even with aromatic herbs, medicinal herbs and teas?
This is indeed so.
Do you know the names Virgil Armstrong, alias UFO Pope, as well as Douglas Poe and James J. Huttak?
The names are known to me. Why do you ask? We've talked about Armstrong before.
Lunatics and fantasists who mess up ufology.
I couldn't say it better.
My next question relates to the Twice of that kind who were of good character and other good values and who regulated things and were responsible in reference to the old Lyrans 389,000 years ago and 13,500 years ago. What was the name of the god with whom Jmanuel worked, and where did these three Twice come from?
That slipped your memory?
I don't remember that. Should I?
That's part of your knowledge. You probably lost it as a result of your breakdown in 1982, but to answer your question, 389,000 years ago, Lars was the Twice who had the guilty travelers under his care, before his work in the Sol system, and therefore on Earth. He came from the planet Actgren in the Freeman system, which was a lone colony in the area of the Nezer galaxy, which is 320 million light-years away from Earth. 13,500 years ago, Twice who came from the land of Kaitami on the planet Lan, was responsible and in charge. Jmanuel finally worked together with Twice Kalatan, who came from Era.
Then I would like to know which planets you are responsible for as Twice.
For Era, for Earth and for a planet called Amaban.
And where is this planet? Is it perhaps the sister planet of Era, which can be seen so beautifully green-blue in the sky?
No, Twice Quetzal is responsible for that now, because the old Twice Atreides left his life. The planet Amaban is in a system of our space-time structure, which we call Harkonnen and which belongs to our Federation.
You told me in private that Quetzal Twice is on one of your planets. That's news. Where is he actually? When will the twit finally come back? And on which planet is he actually roaming around?
If everything goes well, he will visit you in the course of the next year. That was unfortunately just as impossible for him as it was so far also impossible to bring you to my daughter Semjace. Quetzal is responsible as Twice for 2 planets in the Harkonnen system.
Why didn't it work out with the trip to Semjace?
The technology of transmitter transport is not yet so mature that it would be absolutely safe.
Then next year if it works. Now again a question about absences for group monthly meetings, meditation, Sunday service and night watch, etc. How should we hold it in the future? Shall we stubbornly go by the given letter?
For this purpose, the rules were created and given, otherwise there will never be order.
Would it be appropriate in the future for such motions to be submitted to the full board of directors, after which the board will decide whether or not to do so?
This has already been decided by the core group meeting, but this decision was not recorded in writing because it was an unrecorded agenda item. In the future, a written request shall be addressed to the entire board of directors, which shall then decide on yes or number.
You relieve me of a worry and Angelbert can breathe a sigh of relief. This will put an end to Engelbert and me playing off against each other all the time. Such a decision would have been necessary for a long time.
You should have acted in this form a long time ago.
Which of course you're right about. Another question, especially in Switzerland and Germany, there is currently a discussion about the pros and cons of whether homosexuals are allowed to marry or should marry each other as same-sex people, and so on. In this regard, there are usually no laws that would allow such marriages. I now have the question of how such things are handled in your country. Do you still birth people who are homosexual or transsexual? In my opinion, it should actually be the case on Earth that homosexuals of the same sex kind could get together, so to speak, in the form of a partnership, which grants them legal rights, as they are given with normal married couples. I am not talking about a male and female right in terms of gender, but the legal rights that apply to married couples in any form of social and human recognition. Same-sex homosexuals who join forces can do so by forming a same-sex partnership that grants them all the social and human rights of a married couple. What they then do or leave together in sexual terms is their beer alone. In my opinion, it should therefore be legally possible for homosexuals of the same sex to be able to join together as partners in a same-sex partnership, with all the social and human rights of a normal married couple, but without such a couple being able to officially call themselves a married couple, because in my opinion such a designation can only be granted to a same-sex couple that can procreate offspring with one another, which is why such a union is also called a marriage alliance. If I remember correctly, then such or at least a similar regulation of this form also applies to you.
That is correct, at least in the form that we apply a law of this kind described by you, where we are responsible for humanities in which homosexuality still appears, which can be caused by various factors, but which in any case is always genetically triggered, which is also the case for transsexuality. In our own peoples, no degenerated forms of homosexuality or transsexuality have appeared for many millennia, which does not mean, however, that the normal homosexual as well as the purely natural condition of homosexuality would no longer appear, which means that latently every form of life has two gendered genetic forces, only as far as the homosexuality of that form is concerned, that it could still reach degeneration, as well as sodomy, that men and women, for example, sexually meet with animals, no longer appears with our peoples, nor does a degenerated transsexuality or any other sexual degeneration forms, such as for example sexual hatred or rape, sexual masochism or sadism, etc. All these evils belong with all our peoples likewise to the past, like also criminality, greed for power and other degenerations, which still belong to the agenda with the terrestrial human being. By the mere observance of the doctrine of creative law and commandment, all evils of emotional, desirable, thought-conditioned as well as fear-conditioned degenerations have been extinguished with our peoples, while other things have been eliminated or are eliminated by genetic influences and genetic manipulations. For example, sodomistically degenerated homosexuality, transsexuality, the rape instinct as well as sexual degenerations of any other kind, like sadism and masochism etc. In every pregnancy of a woman, the fruit of her body is subjected to a thorough examination, which is carried out using the most modern technical analysis equipment, outside of the woman's body and without the need to penetrate her body with instruments, etc. If serious genetic fallibilities are detected in the fruit of the woman's body, genetic influences or genetic manipulations are carried out by means of radiations that are accurate to a billionth of a millimeter, thus correcting the genetic defects or damage. This procedure guarantees that no offspring will be born suffering from any degeneration or abnormality in the forms I have mentioned. but thus no offspring in the womb are matured and born, which show any physical or otherwise health damages, because we act according to the creative law that every life at its birth has a right to come into being with absolutely immaculate body and undamaged consciousness as well as, without any evil of any kind, which is why the detailed examination already takes place in the woman's 7th week of pregnancy, after which, if necessary, appropriate actions are taken which can also lead to the elimination of the fruit in the mother's womb if this becomes necessary, such as, for example, the pregnancy of the woman's mother, for example, if the absolute health of the body and consciousness of the offspring is not guaranteed, or if the life or health of the mother is endangered by the delivery of the fruit or its birth.
That was detailed. Thank you. Do you know just how many wars are being fought on Earth at the moment?
There are 26 of them, but there are a total of 73 conflicts worldwide.
Crazy, especially when you consider that the UN does nothing or not exactly much about it. In my opinion, this squad is just a puppet organization led by absolutely irresponsible people, which is also the case with many rulers in the world, both males and females. Nothing is being done to stop all this madness, quite the contrary, because everything is only being done so that the fighters can continue to murder. Instead of the UN troops carrying out combat missions and ending the madness of war in the various countries, such as the former Yugoslavia, they are celebrating holidays in the troubled countries and contenting themselves with pointless and costly patrols and supplying the population with food. These conflicts and wars could be partially nipped in the bud in hours or at least in few days, if the UN troops or even the NATO troops would intervene fighting sensibly. But there is no talk of this, because on the one hand the responsible people are as stupid as bins and don't know anything about anything, or they secretly earn millions by being content with alibi exercises. But that is criminal one way or the other.
Your words correspond to the truth. Cowardice, irresponsibility, false humanity, not understanding the real situation, greed for profit and many other things must be accused of those who are responsible for world security and for the security of human lives.
I don't want to talk about it any further, because the whole irresponsible act of those responsible makes me pissed off. So let us talk about something else. I have another question about homosexuality. According to the laws of creation, male homosexuality is contrary to nature and therefore a natural degeneration, but there is no law, no commandment and no directive of creation that says that homosexuality should be banned or punished. Nevertheless, homosexuality has always been frowned upon and often even punished with death. Even today, homosexuals are very often defamed, trampled, abused, cut, excluded and kept out of occupations and pushed into the mud, although this would not justify any law or commandment of creation. According to the creative laws and commandments, homosexuals also have exactly the same rights in every respect as the so-called normals, the heterosexuals. There is not a single point in the creative laws and commandments to be found which speaks of homosexuals or transsexuals etc. having other and lesser rights than those people who describe themselves as normal in this relationship for their naturalness and unkindness. Therefore the whole hatred and all ostracism against homosexuals and transsexuals etc. is pure human machination, which started sometime in the distant past, but which I would like to know when, how and why it came about.
That is unknown to me. The origin of the whole drama loses itself somewhere in the past, which for me to fathom out is practically a thing of impossibility.
Too bad. Then to something else. Here these are 3 fax pages I received from America on the 15th of this month. Please read them through and then tell me what you think. It's pure bullshit, but you should still read these lines.
Thank you, I can't believe it. This impudence is unbelievable, these lies and this fraud, it is really unbelievable.
I actually see you. Besides you are excited and should calm down. You should keep it like me, just laughing at the outrageous lies that this two-bird medicine man brings along. It's really unbelievable what these Indians are lying about, and it's an outrage, but it's not worth getting upset about. On the other hand, we've known for years that America is home to the worst swindlers, liars, cheaters and charlatans in terms of UFOs and contacts, and that no one anywhere in the world can even touch them with cold water in this regard. This has already begun with GA, and has survived to this day. The fact, however, that those in America who can be accused of real experiences with extraterrestrial intelligences must suffer as a result as well, even if in reality these are only half a handful, does not bother these liars, deceivers and charlatans etc., who add everything in order to denigrate the Americans in general. Of course only the liars, deceivers and charlatans etc. can do anything for this disparagement, and these are the deceivers and liars and charlatans etc., who must also be called such. Unfortunately, swindlers, liars, deceivers, charlatans and sectarians, etc., are especially marked in America and in large numbers, and probably in no other country on earth do they appear in such masses and with such impudence as they do in America, regardless of whether they are R, B, F, B, G, A, G, G, medicine man, or whether they are in the hands of the people of the United States. John Two Bird, H, M, R, W, or whatever. They are all the ones who demonize everything and bring the Americans into disrepute, which ultimately also affects all those who are decent and honest and can't help being denigrated. As you know, we haven't been speaking well of these lying, deceitful, swindling, sectarian and charlatan Americans for years, which is why we have once again coined a swear word for all those around the globe who are liars, cheats, swindlers, sectarians, profit sharks and charlatans etc. We call them only Americans.
I can show some understanding for this, but you should be careful not to discredit or insult the blameless Americans.
We don't have that in mind, because we only want to describe the evil rabble in this form. I know that such a swear word could bring a whole people into disrepute, but that is not the point of what we do, which is why we talk about honest Americans as honest Americans or call them by their first names. But perhaps you are right that we should be more careful. It is much easier if we simply continue to use these common names for liars and cheats, charlatans, swindlers, sectarians and profit sharks. It wouldn't be right for me if the honest Americans also had to suffer under the insult Americans and were discredited.
That would be wise, even if I have to admit honestly that the insulting word has a certain justification in relation to the mistakes. I assume that something similar will appear in our federation, namely among a people who bear the name demeanor. These dementia sufferers are still very underdeveloped and are cared for impulsively by the forces of our federation. The people of this people have degenerated in many ways. Murder, lies and fraud etc. are part of their agenda, but also every form of inhumanity and crime. As a result of these things in dementia, it has become common practice in the languages of certain of our Federation peoples that only the word dementia is used, or dementia, when there is talk of degenerated forms of life or degeneration.
Interesting. Then also such things repeat themselves somewhere again and again in the universe. But what do you say to the enormous lie of this medicine man John Two Bird?
The light attracts the moths, says an ancient proverb. But you can also say that truth attracts all riffraff. For a long time, In certain circles the truth has been penetrating more and more that you are actually in contact with us and that you are truly the only person on Earth at present who is connected with intelligences of extraterrestrial origin in both physical and telepathic form. For this reason, on the one hand, attempts are made to disrupt or ridicule our contacts and connections by all possible means full of intrigues, while on the other hand, lunatics, the sick, those who are addicted to renown, and many others try to posture themselves in public in order to be regarded as something they imagine. These liars, cheaters and swindlers, however, do not consider that we would never get involved with them, which is why their stupid and lying assertions have no truthful foundation. We could never find ourselves ready to enter into physical or telepathic or any other kind of contact with earthlings, because on the one hand we would endanger our own lives because our mental vibrations cannot harmonize with those of earthlings, and on the other hand because the machinations of all the lies, the swindle, the deception, the charlatanism, the sectarianism and all other degenerations of the Earth's people alone offer no possibility of connection between them and us. All the degenerations of human beings on Earth sufficiently prove that they are incapable of any contact with us, not to mention the impossibility of harmonizing the various mental vibrations. This means that the Earth people must find their way. Even those who cannot understand and do not know the secret of why you are the only person on planet Earth who can maintain contacts with us and with other forms of extraterrestrial life, especially all the charlatans, liars, sectarians, deceivers and all other trash cannot cope with this, which is why they are envious and denigrate you in every possible way. This also applies to those who call themselves megalomaniacal ufological or esoteric experts, but who in reality have no idea what is really going on.
You mean the esoterics and ufologists as well as crop circle specialists, etc.
Of course, I'm talking about them.
Special comedians, these guys. Just like those Americans who do nonsense with their little grays. Say, doesn't that put an end to these weirdos, comedians, phantoms, liars, cheats, swindlers and sectarians as well as charlatans, schizophrenics and all the unfair rabble? Is it really to be the case that they can continue to do their mischief and drive people astray and into delusion, misery and misery?
Unfortunately, there is no end in sight in this regard. On the contrary, everything that is related to it will increase even more, with everything becoming more and more in a vicious religious sectarian delusion.
Gold prospects. Well, those would have been all my questions and concerns, so we can switch to other things that aren't supposed to be official anymore.